Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Friday, September 30th, 2022, and I'm your host, George Kerth, joined by the two other amigos, Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap. How you guys doing here going into week 4?
Doing great, man. Did you see those unis? I don't even want to talk about the game. I just want to talk about those unis. The all whites versus the all teals. Matchup of the year, uniform wise.
Yeah, but I don't know how you don't want to talk about the game with Tyler Boyd putting up 4 touchdowns in the game and over 200 yards. That's insane.
The worst part is, we're recording this before the Thursday night game, and that's still probably actually going to happen. But the uniforms make me want to go back to Color Rush until I realize that they're like the two good Color Rush uniforms in the whole league, and then we're going to see horrible uniforms the rest of the way. Anyway, you're here to hear a week 4 preview, so we're going to talk about week 4 here in this episode. We're going to hit some NFL news and notes as well. Also, make sure you find us on thecouchgms.com and our social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at the Couch GMs, and join our Discord chat. The link is in the description of the video or podcast you are watching. All right, let's jump into NFL news. NFL news will start off in Cleveland, where Browns defensive end Myles Garrett was involved in a single car accident on Monday after practice. We just didn't quite get it into our show. It came out on Tuesday. He was allegedly driving, had to swerve to miss an animal, and his car went off the road and flipped multiple times. But luckily, him and the passenger in the car are doing okay, and he was actually back in the building with the Browns on Thursday. It is unclear if he's going to play this week, but I know it's just shocking enough to see that he is doing well, and I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, thank God cars have great safety features these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you saw the pictures on Twitter, it was definitely a nasty crash, and all of us here at the Couch GMs are hoping that Myles Garrett has a speedy recovery, not just because he's a great football player and we enjoy watching him, but he is a person outside of football too, and those situations are always scary, and hope he recovers quickly.
Definitely, and I'll also throw in here prayers up to anybody that's living down in Florida who is affected by the hurricane. I know we had a couple of thoughts that the game statuses might be affected, but this is way more than just a game as well. So thinking of everybody down in Florida and even in the Carolinas as this hurricane is going to make landfall again at some point. But we'll move on to some more football, where the Miami Dolphins were practicing in Cincinnati ahead of the Thursday night game, mostly because of the storm. And there were some onlookers upstairs that were taking some video of the Miami Dolphins practice and posting it on Twitter, maybe trying to give a little leg up to the Cincinnati Bengals. But there was word that the Dolphins were running 12-man sets in their walkthrough to try to throw off any game plan tips. So very interesting chess match happening there. The Dolphins knew they were being watched and tried to play with them a little bit.
Hey, if you're being watched, you got to outsmart it, and that's a great move by first-year coach Mike McDaniel to intentionally put 12 men out there so you don't know which guy won't be out there come game day.
Yeah, how much did Bill Belichick pay the guy? That's what I want to know.
Oh, so we think this is a Bill Belichick guy.
I mean, Belichick lost to the Dolphins. Dolphins are 3-0. I mean, he's already been caught trying to film practices right before a game, so he's got to be slicker than that, and he's got to record it well before a game. They don't play again until January, so it's definitely Bill Belichick. I want to know how much he got, but I'm sure it's great.
Yeah, I'm just remembering back to the Eagles-Patriots Super Bowl, and the Eagles ran a literal fake walkthrough on the last day before the game, thinking they were being watched. But this one, legitimately having practice footage post on Twitter, is kind of crazy, and I'm interested to see what kind of investigation comes out of it through the NFL, the University of Cincinnati. But speaking of the Dolphins, we have a lot to talk about with them, even though we're not even talking about a game that already happened when you guys are listening. We mentioned earlier in the week about that concussion protocol investigation with Tua. The NFL and the Players Association did check everything and said that everything was followed properly. Tua did not, in fact, have a concussion. It must have been his back locking up on the field that made it look like it.
All right, there you have it.
Everything was followed. We don't have to speculate anymore. And that's also a good reminder that we can be Couch GMs, but we can't be Couch medical personnel. Like, they have to do their job in the field and see the people. But speaking of Couch GMs, let's do what we're all here for and jump into our Week 4 preview.
Week 4 starts off a little earlier, at least on Sunday than usual, as we are seeing a game over in London, 9:30 Eastern Time. So make sure you guys are setting your lineups on Saturday night, getting up extra early on Sunday, at least for that Vikings and Saints game, which is the game over in London. So why don't we start off on the Saints side, because that's the really interesting one injury-wise. So teams are over there already in Europe practicing, but Jameis Winston has not practiced yet. Michael Thomas has not practiced yet, and Jarvis Landry is a limited participant in practice. Could we see an exciting Andy Dalton game over there, guys?
No. There's no such thing.
Wow. The lack of any emotion, just the no, is making me stumble to speak, and I already struggle with that enough on my own. I don't need the help from you to do that. But I do think it is being reported that they still think Jameis Winston will probably play. They're just kind of being protective of his back. So still expect Jameis Winston. Michael Thomas is the guy that's probably not going to go, which I think if Jameis does go, I think you can start Chris Olave pretty safely. He's been the guy that's been stepping up. But I did want to ask you guys, Tyler brought it up last week and about Taysom Hill in the tight end spot. But do you play him this week with the potential that he could be a quarterback if Andy Dalton would go down, if Jameis doesn't go, and try to, steal some quarterback points in your tight end spot? How bad the tight end market is. Like, if you have one of the top 5, I understand it, but what's the difference between him and Irv Smith Jr.? What's the difference between him and Cole Kmet?
Well, he's better than Cole Kmet, let's be honest.
I'm okay. So 2 weeks ago, it was 2 weeks ago when I mentioned it, but 2 weeks ago, I say, would you ever start Taysom Hill in your tight end slot? Would you ever think about picking him up, even just as a stash on your bench in case you wanted to throw a dart at him? And I got no, no. And now you're the one that's bringing it up like, well, maybe we do start Taysom Hill. Like, man, things change quickly in 2 weeks.
If you're going to start him because of the quarterback injury, though, you're going about it all wrong. Like, we always have been preaching, don't draft to injuries, don't worry about injuries. Now you're telling me you're going to start a tight end who is an emergency quarterback, hoping there's an injury?
No, I'm not hoping that there's an injury, but it would not be surprising if he gets more snaps at quarterback if Andy Dalton's out there compared to Jameis Winston.
I mean, I guess it's possible, but I still don't think you can rely on that fantasy-wise, in my opinion.
I think if you're in the position where Taysom Hill's an option at tight end, then the rest of your tight ends are also probably garbage. So, sure, why not? I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, if you're already in a deep league with no tight ends, you punted that position, take the dart throw at him. He's same level as all the other garbage tight ends you mentioned. So why not? Otherwise, on the Saints squad, like, I'm not really starting Jameis Winston this week. Chris Olave is probably the only guy I would start, and that's if Jameis Winston plays. If Winston doesn't play, I might not even start him. Otherwise, the Saints are look, Kamara's been rough lately. I'm not saying bench Kamara. Like, you're still starting him if you have him, but the dude's not been performing up to what we expected. So even he is a sketchy play.
I'm going to throw the argument that you were making about tight ends back at you a little bit, though, from like last week. Like, none of those first round running backs are performing either. So when you look at it in the scale of what's Alvin Kamara doing in a fantasy points and what's Alvin Kamara doing compared to other running backs in his area, he's performing right up to where they're at.
Yeah, well, the issue is when I was talking about tight ends, I was saying that like none of the top tight ends are performing, but the issue is the rest of the tight ends all suck. So everybody's pretty even. So yes, you can start just about anybody because they have the same value. Running backs, yes, there is some guys that are at the tops that are not performing up to expectations, and Kamara is keeping up with them. But then there's guys like James Robinson, Michael Carter, Antonio Gibson that was taken later that is performing above expectations. And I'm not saying you want to go out and start those guys over Alvin Kamara, but man, it makes you want to consider it with how Kamara's been playing.
Makes sense. Yeah, I get that.
So I'm just going to ask the question. The hot waiver wire pickup, and we're going to talk about this game in a little bit, was Jamal Williams this week or even Khalil Herbert. Are you playing any of those guys over Alvin Kamara?
If DeAndre Swift is out, for sure, and Montgomery is out, for sure, which it's trending in that direction. But if they are definitely for sure out, I'd start either one of them over Kamara. I know it sounds crazy. Jamal Williams is getting 3 touchdowns a game basically as a backup. So you give me all the yards with it. Yeah, absolutely. Lions offense is moving right now. Khalil Herbert put up ridiculous points in 1 quarter of play. He's on a team that only throws the ball 5 times a game, so it goes through the running game. So Khalil Herbert, yeah, absolutely. Value again. I'd start either one of them over Kamara.
And an interesting fact, Khalil Herbert is actually RB8 on the season right now. That's where he's
That's
at.
insane.
That is
So,
crazy because he's basically played one game and a couple of shared snaps.
right. So definitely, all the positions are kind of wacky right now, and we're hoping to get some clear guidance. But let's talk about the other side of the football real quick, or the other side of the matchup. The Minnesota Vikings, Dalvin Cook, he was on our injury list on the earlier show this week, but he is full participant. They're expecting him to go, so you're going to play him if he's out there, but just be wary of the shoulder popping back out.
Fantasy PSA. If you added Alexander Madison as a Cook owner or not, still don't drop him again, please. We know if Cook misses time, when Cook misses a game later this season, Madison is an automatic play and someone who can put up a crooked number just right off your bench. Like, he shouldn't have been as widely available as he was, which even if we thought, like, I was still pretty confident Cook was going to play coming into the week, I still wanted to put Madison on the waiver wire because he shouldn't even be there.
So we know you're going to start Dalvin Cook. We know you're going to start Justin Jefferson. Kirk Cousins is a potential play if you punted the quarterback position. But the guy I want to talk about, Adam Thielen. 3 targets in week 1, 4 targets in week or 3 receptions in week 1, 4 receptions in week 2, 6 receptions in week 3, slowly progressing upwards, still underwhelming. The most yards he's gotten on the season is 61. New Orleans, number 8 against the wide receiver. Do you start Thielen?
I think he's in flex consideration, and I say that, but if you're in this matchup, you don't put Thielen in the actual flex spot because it's an early game. Give yourself the flexibility to play either position in the later games if you would need it. But yeah, I think the way that the Saints have played, they've allowed some points. I mean, they're not an easy defense by any means. It's not like I have to force Adam Thielen out here, but I do like this matchup if you need a flexible guy.
He's in flex consideration for me too. Like Cody said, not actually in your flex, but there's a lot of guys I like better than him because I feel like the 2 weeks he's been relevant had been the 2 weeks that Justin Jefferson's fallen off. I don't expect that trend to continue. You're still starting Justin Jefferson despite him making you rip your hair out right now. So I'm trying to avoid him if I can. It's not necessarily a great matchup like Tyler said. And hey, there's just so many guys that are on the border that I like better.
And one of those guys I do like better, who I wasn't a huge fan of, but he's starting to come on. And it's in our next matchup. It's starting the 1:00 slate, the Cleveland Browns at the Atlanta Falcons. I like Amari Cooper better. Some people would say that's an obvious answer, but I also like Drake London better than Adam Thielen at this point. So those are 2 options right there. If you were debating between that, I would go over Adam Thielen, even in a positive matchup versus the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, Amari Cooper's done nothing but improve himself the last couple of weeks, so I don't blame you at all. Cooper's kind of one of those frustrating guys where, he did it with the Raiders. He did it with the Cowboys, where he's going to give you 3-4 weeks of just excellence. And then he's going to give you 2 weeks where he just disappears, whether he's not targeted or whether he's dropping the ball a lot. He's just very inconsistent. If you can ride him when he's high, you're gonna be appreciative of it. It's gonna win you some games. Just be ready for that fall off because it happens out of nowhere, and that's the fear is that you throw him into your lineup, and that's the week he puts up your dud and starts his downswing. He's the kind of guy that I like trading high. If he is on an upswing, if he really is putting up a lot of points, maybe sell him before he does dip down.
I'm with you there because I just don't like people who are as volatile as he is. So I'm with you in trying to sell, but if you still have him on your roster, not a bad flex play. And then the only other 2 from the Browns I'm really looking at are the running backs, especially in a good matchup against Atlanta. I have no problem starting Kareem Hunt, and then Nick Chubb's always in your lineup. especially with David Njoku appearing to not be trending toward playing. He practiced on Wednesday and then was a DNP on Thursday. We'll keep an eye out. It might be just one of those veteran rest days, but I think he was a little banged up, so he's a sketchy play if he does go.
For sure. And on the Falcon side, unless George just missed it, and I completely blank. But Cordell Patterson, reigning NFC player of the week, has DNP'd the last 2 days. So he might not be available this Sunday, which makes that running back position very interesting. And would you take a shot in the dark, or is it Patterson or nobody from the Falcons backfield?
I would debate playing Allgeier if I was, or sorry, it's Algier. I've been wrong. Yeah. I would debate playing Algier if you're someone who is desperate at running back. But now that we're starting to get some of these guys back, like a J.K. Dobbins or Ramondre Stevenson starting to like become more relevant, that kind of thing, you're probably better off going with the safe bet because he hasn't really done anything that's been mind blowing yet. But by volume alone, he's worth at least a look for your lineup if Patterson doesn't go.
All right. Well, that's probably enough for that matchup. So let's talk about one of the best matchups, in my opinion, for the 1 o'clock slate, and that is the Buffalo Bills at the Baltimore Ravens. I'm sure we have a lot to say about this one. So let's start with the Buffalo Bills side. Dawson Knox is a limited participant. Wide receiver Gabriel Davis went from limited to DNP on Thursday, and then just had to throw it in there. Jake Kumaro has been DNP for the last 2 days. So still, those pass-catching options outside of Stephon Diggs are up in the air for Josh Allen. It doesn't mean you're not playing Josh Allen. That would be crazy. And you're still playing Stephon Diggs. Any concern? Like, if Gabriel Davis goes, would you play him? And then if he doesn't, would you play Isaiah McKenzie?
If he doesn't, I would play McKenzie. The Ravens have been giving up a ton of passing yards. So there's points to be had. And even if they weren't, even if this is one of the top defenses against the pass, I mean, it's Josh Allen. He's going to find a way to get people open. If all of your receiving options are injured and Stephon Diggs is on the field, the defense is going to focus on Stephon Diggs. That leaves the rest of the guys open, and that guy is Isaiah McKenzie, and he's really come alive recently. So yeah, if Gabriel Davis doesn't go, I like Isaiah McKenzie a lot. If Gabriel Davis does go, I don't think I would start Davis or McKenzie. I know that sounds crazy, but the issue is if he's not practicing as of now, when we record this podcast, that means he might be limited in the game. I don't really want to start a receiver who's only going to see about 50% snap share. If he's in a 50-50 snap split with McKenzie, they're both going to be limited points-wise. So if Davis plays, don't play either of them. If Davis doesn't play McKenzie.
I'm kind of on the boat where you're playing all of them. I'm not expecting this to be an absolute shootout, but I do think the Bills have more potential to score more than 19 points like they did last week. And even when they were scoring 19, yeah, Gabe Davis wasn't fantastic. He is another week now separated from the injury. I don't expect Devin Singletary to go out there and get 11 targets again. So I think McKenzie, Diggs, and Davis, there's enough volume to go around to make all three of them fantasy relevant in a matchup like this. And the big reason why I say they have more potential to score more than 19 is because even though their defense is good, I expect this to actually be a little bit higher scoring than we would think coming in. Like, Baltimore still has one of the best offenses in the league so far. So they might be able to find a little bit of space against Buffalo and make them have to, might be a back and forth kind of keep up kind of game.
Yeah, I mean, George, you're starting to convince me. I was going to say I'd play Davis if he's in. If he's not, I'd play McKenzie and kind of like split the difference between you two, because the Baltimore Ravens are one of the highest scoring offenses, which is kind of crazy because we're so used to there being their defense, but they're currently 32nd ranked against fantasy wide receivers. So they're giving up fantasy points. So I do like Gabriel Davis if he is in your lineup. But I think George has convinced me that all three are worth a shot of playing. But on the Ravens side, the big injury and the big question is still J.K. Dobbins. He got back to some action. He then got added to the injury report again, this time for a chest injury. So he's now dealing with the third thing. But he did get some action. Are you playing J.K. Dobbins this week? Because I still am not, but I want to hear your guys' opinion.
I'm trying to avoid it if I can because the Bills is still a tough matchup. Even though I think there's going to be points put up, I'd almost rather him go off on my bench, just because the matchup's bad. If the matchup was good, I'd be confident with playing him this week because he did come back first shot, almost got 50% snap share, which is still part of him working in, and actually looked pretty good. He looked pretty explosive. I was surprised. So I'd give it one more week just because of the matchup, but I like where he's trending.
Nope. I'd leave him on the bench. I like J.K. Dobbins. I was very upset in our league of record when George got him as late as he did. And everybody else thought it was interesting that I was that upset because I am a big fan of Dobbins, but I'm not playing him. Not in this matchup. He is still limited. I watched the Bills go against the Titans, and I watched Derrick Henry have more rushing yards after contact than actual rushing yards. Like, take a second and consider what that even means. He had more rushing yards after contact than rushing yards. That's how good the Bills' defense was against the run. When they're ready for the run, they're good against it. If they're ready for the pass, they might let up on the run a little bit. But the Ravens have always been a run-first team, even if Lamar is balling out right now. I still think they're going to play for the run. Dobbins is going to get shut down. I'm not touching him.
All right, that's some good advice, some good insight, and some good stats. Next matchup, though, we might just want to start this one with a prayer for Carson Wentz. After getting sacked 9 times in week 3, he now has to face Defensive Player of the Year frontrunner Micah Parsons, Dexter Lawrence. He might get sacked another 9 times. And we're talking Commanders at the Dallas Cowboys. Carson Wentz, actually a top 12 fantasy quarterback right now. He's looked pretty good. Would you play him? And which wide receiver are you playing?
Curtis Samuel, no.
It's the same as I said about Kirk Cousins. Look, if you punted the quarterback position enough that you got down to the guys like Kirk Cousins or Derek Carr or one of these other guys you were hoping would have a breakout and they really have been a little lackluster, Carson Wentz really isn't a bad option. I know that the Cowboys defense is good, but I also have watched Carson Wentz week after week struggle in the first half and then put up ridiculous amounts of garbage time points because it happens. If you go down quickly, you will be able to put up garbage time points. And I think even against a crappy Cowboys team, there will still be garbage time points to be had. Not that I love the start. If you have somebody else, please go out and start him. But again, if you punted the quarterback position, why not? But, as Cody is saying, like, there's so many sacks to be had. I think the biggest fantasy asset in this game could very well be the Cowboys defense. So if you are in a league that has team defense as a position, which most standard leagues do, Cowboys defense are a good streamer. They're available in most leagues. You can go out and pick them up if they haven't been gotten already, and they are a solid start this week.
Agreed. And just to justify my no a little bit, I think I can name 12 quarterbacks that I'd like better than Carson Wentz this week, which is why I'd say no. Maybe you're in a situation where all 12 of those guys are taken and then Carson Wentz is there. But, like, I would debate starting a Marcus Mariota over Carson Wentz. I would definitely start a Jared Goff against Seattle over Carson Wentz. That's why it's like he's pretty far down my list.
Valid point.
Yeah.
Marcus Mariota is on the start list on the couchgms.com. You should check that out. Ooh. Cowboys side, Dak Prescott still not practicing. I know they got some really hype on Monday night because his stitches got removed, but he's still not practicing, so it should be another week of Cooper Rush. And then Dalton Schultz is, back practicing this week, which I think is a good sign. It's a 1:00 game, so you'll be able to, play him. And I think you do play him as long as he's out there. He's a good enough tight end. It's not a deep tight end class. So if Dalton Schultz goes, I'd play him. And if I have to pivot on Sunday, I'm pivoting to Taysom Hill. Which I can't because it's a 9:30 game, but nobody caught me.
I see. That's a good one.
Lost me.
Keeping you guys on your toes.
I was too busy laughing at the fact that you said you'd start Taysom Hill. I still just can't believe it myself. But we can move on to the Seattle Seahawks traveling to the Detroit Lions. And like I mentioned, Jared Goff I like as a little bit of a streamer play if you need a quarterback this week. But their offense is pretty banged up. Amon-Ra St. Brown did not practice. DeAndre Swift did not practice. Especially if Swift doesn't go, Jamal Williams slam dunk play.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yep. He's starting. Yep.
Right. And then is there any receivers you would talk about if Amra doesn't go?
I don't hate DJ Chark.
Interesting. Cody?
You'd have to really pull my wrist to make you play one. I would actually think Josh Reynolds. He seems to be the second guy in the behind. It's a big step down. Would be the guy, but I think he's even on the injury report too. So probably would stay away from the other pass catchers. But if you made me pick one, it would be Josh Reynolds.
I'm hoping Quintez Cephas comes back alive because I used to really like that guy and he used to look really good, and then he just stopped being used. So hopefully he comes alive. But I don't hate DJ Chark. If you're in one of those leagues, like, look, I'm in a dynasty league where the depth is rough and you have to start a ton of people. So it gets to the point where you're like, man, I don't know who to play anymore. DJ Chark's not a bad option if you're in that deep of a league. But if you're in a normal standard 10 or 12 team league redraft, like, you're probably not starting a Lions receiver. You're starting potentially, if you want to start Goff, you can. You got TJ Hawkinson, and then you got Jamal Williams. Other than that, you're not touching it.
Yeah, and Hawkinson did not practice to limited participant. I'm assuming he is going to go, and he could actually have a really big week if there's no Amon-Ra St. Brown. So that's a good play.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, if Amon-Ra goes DNP, questionable, and ends up playing, I'd still play Amon-Ra, even though he didn't practice all week, because that's how good he has been for that team. But that's
he was expected to miss the rest of the game last week when he got out with injury, ended up coming back and getting some snaps. So, like, it does seem like it's not the most serious injury. They could just be taking it easy.
Yeah, and then on the Seattle side, don't start the running backs. Don't start Geno Smith. Don't start Tyler Lockett. You can probably still start.
Metcalf is still my guy. That's it.
Yeah, I'd still start DK Metcalf, but they're just not pushing the ball down the field enough to. And maybe they'll have to. Maybe this is a game where you'll get some points because the Lions are top 3 scoring offense through 3 weeks, and they might just put up a ton of points. The Seahawks will have to throw the ball around, which is, if this is the highest scoring game of the week, I wouldn't be surprised, but that would also blow my mind.
Yeah, tight end dartboard, Will Dissly also. That's another guy. If you're struggling with tight end, you could potentially pick up and stream, but still, it's not a great game, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the matchup's what makes you do that, definitely. But I'd still try to avoid a lot of Seahawks if possible. We'll move on to another 1:00 game here. The Chargers traveling to the Houston Texans. Injury report for the Chargers, looking good for Justin Herbert, not looking good for Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen was back at practice and then left practice early with a trainer, is now dealing with a hamstring injury. Not
he was always dealing with a hamstring injury.
So it's a re-aggravation of the same hamstring injury then. My bad.
We believe,
but
yes.
Yeah. But not good, especially now, like, if you would re-aggravate it on a Thursday. I'm avoiding him. I think that makes Mike Williams a solid play, especially against a bad defense. There are a lot of their other receivers still dealing with problems. Maybe you play a tight end from there. Might see some extra passing work for Austin Eckler. What are you thinking?
I think this Chargers team has been bitten hard by the injury bug, and it's starting to concern me long term about this team, what we expected from them. I mean, they just put Joey Bosa on IR. They're missing Rashawn Slater, one of their best offensive linemen. Corey Linsley still not practicing. And don't forget, Justin Herbert still has the rib injury, which he did not look great against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I'm not taking this matchup as a big, smash all Chargers players like I would traditionally do against the Houston Texans. With that said, though, Austin Eckler, I know he hasn't been great, but he is still too talented not to be in your lineup. And then Mike Williams would be the wide receiver, and I do think Gerald Everett is still a streaming option.
Yeah, and I'm 100% reading too hard into things. But the AFC South also has the AFC West number. Last week, 3 South teams played 3 West teams, and all 3 of them won. Titans beating the Raiders. You got the Jags beating the Chargers. Colts beating the Chiefs. So I don't know. These AFC South teams, they might have the lucky juju against these AFC West teams.
Which is crazy, since the AFC West was supposed to be this dominant force, and the AFC South was considered 1.5 teams deep.
I got a question because I didn't say it last week, and I feel like I let the listeners down because it's so on brand. But I want to go back and look at how many of those games was a West Coast team traveling to an East Coast team at 1 o'clock. Because I know the Raiders at the Titans were. The Chiefs, they went to Midway, and where was the Jacksonville game? Was that in?
Jacksonville game was...
That was in LA.
In
that
LA.
was in LA. So 1-1, I guess. So didn't really work out that week, but that is definitely something to keep an eye on. But I guess we could just move on to the Houston Texans. Well, let's talk about them. I guess we should. Dameon Pierce.
Dameon Pierce.
Nice.
Okay.
Brandon Cooks.
Good talk.
Brandon Cooks is interesting, but there's just something about he's getting a lot of targets, but he is just off a little bit with Davis Mills, and they're not connecting. So whether it could be this week that they finally start hitting because he's getting those targets, but I think you could look elsewhere other than Brandon Cooks. But Brandon Cooks is still a really good wide receiver, so it will be hard to bench him.
I like it. So
All
Dameon
right.
Pierce. Tyler, take us away. Tennessee Titans, Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, it's a huge game for the division. I mean, everybody in the AFC South, other than when we play AFC West, is absolute garbage. So this is a big game and could end up deciding the division later. No big deal. Only week 4. Already could decide the division. Jonathan Taylor was a full participant in practice. He's expected to play. No worries there. Wednesday's DNP was his first missed practice in his career dating back to high school. So that's a pretty interesting fact there. On the Titans side, Traylon Burks was injured. He is now a full participant in practice, so he should be fine as well. He was sick, yes, but either way, he wasn't practicing. We've seen illnesses hold people out before, or at least make them look worse. But now he's practicing in full. Yeah, you look like you got 2 relatively healthy teams on the offensive side of the ball going at each other. I guess let's start with the Titans. Who do you start? Derrick Henry. That's
next.
Flex option, Robert Woods really is starting to get involved. He had a ton of targets, a lot of catches last week. So Robert Woods could be the guy. He's finally starting to take that step forward in the Titans offense. He could be a potential flex play. Ryan Tannehill's on that same quarterback dartboard that you have Cousins and Carr and Wentz on. So if you're at that kind of crapshoot of quarterback, who cares who you throw in? On the Indianapolis Colts side, Jonathan Taylor, you're obviously going to play. Matt Ryan, I don't even think he's on that dartboard. Anybody else? I mean, we got Michael Pittman. He's a definite start.
Pittman. Yep.
Anybody else from either side of the ball that you're leaning towards playing?
I'm going to throw Jelani Woods.
I'm kidding. Oh, yeah, there you go. That's a good one.
I'm going to throw Jelani Woods on the tight end dartboard.
Okay.
As a guy, if you want to chase points, he had 2 touchdowns last week. He was one of my favorite prospects coming into the draft. Rookie tight ends normally aren't that great, so you would be chasing points, but a lot of tight ends are bad in fantasy, so might not be a bad option.
I mean, I think that pretty much wraps up that game. I have nothing to argue with there. We can move on to the most exciting game of the 1 o'clock window. The Chicago Bears and the New York Giants. It probably actually will be an actual game for him. But when it comes to fantasy, I think you can probably name 2 guys that you're starting from this game. And it's Khalil Herbert. If Montgomery doesn't go, it looks like Montgomery's not going to go. He's a DNP. And Saquon Barkley. Anyone else?
No. Did you guys know through 3 weeks, Justin Fields still doesn't have 300 passing yards, while Joe Flacco has over 1,000?
Yeah. And
is he still 34th in league in passing attempts too? Because I wouldn't be shocked by that either.
Yeah, he's had 7 in back-to-back games, or 8.
That's awful. How?
Yeah, it's honestly crazy how well Joe Flacco's been playing. And let's just go ahead and move to the New York Jets and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Zach Wilson is back and is expected to play.
Who was that?
Bless you to the Couch GM's ghost, whoever that was. That was Joe Flacco's ghost because he is dead now. We have Zach Wilson back. But when you have a guy like Joe Flacco playing, throwing for over 1,000 yards, say what you will about how the Jets have played this year. I mean, I know they're not 3-0 and lighting the world on fire, but they've performed well. The offense is gelling, and there's been nothing but critical reports about Zach Wilson all preseason. So, are you guys shocked at all that Wilson is starting?
No.
I'm actually kind of shocked that he wasn't starting sooner. Because I mean, when it comes to the injury, like I'm shocked they kept him out for 3 weeks. But this team is a young team trying to build. I don't care how well Joe Flacco is playing. You can't just be like, oh yeah, we're going to roll with the 37-year-old quarterback who is less than exciting and the best of his career is behind him. Like, it's got to be Zach Wilson.
Yeah, like George said, Zach's just too young. This team is too young for them not to pivot back to Zach Wilson. It's unfortunate for Joe because he's been playing well, but I think he kind of knew that was his role when he got started. But Joe, since Zach Wilson is starting, we talked about it, a week or two ago, maybe both times. But now that he's back, this could really shake up what the expectation for these pass catchers are. He had a really good rapport with Elijah Moore at the end of the season. Garrett Wilson, so far through 3 weeks, has overtaken Elijah Moore. Breece Hall could get more involved. He could become less involved if Zach Wilson doesn't dump it off as much. So I know there's some guys like Garrett Wilson. He's been pretty solid. He's a top 12 fantasy wide receiver right now. Things could change now that we have a quarterback change, and just something to be mindful about as we watch this game.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks. Let me just put this out there. I absolutely love Corey Davis. He is such a good person. He might not be the greatest receiver, but he is such a good person. I really like Corey Davis a lot, and I root for him. But it almost sucks that Corey Davis is there because Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore are two of the most exciting young receivers in the game. And I'd love to see both of them get as much playing time as they can. Both of them take off to the next level. But with Corey Davis eats into those receptions a lot. He's another guy that he's even being picked up in some leagues and flexed because he's getting used enough. Nobody talks about him because he's a Jet, but as long as he's there, that's even less receptions to go around. We don't know what Elijah Moore is going to do because he did have a rapport with Zach Wilson. We don't know if Garrett Wilson's going to have that same rapport with Zach Wilson. We don't know if Corey Davis is going to eat in a bigger or smaller chunk to these. So I'd say if it was me, I'm not playing any of these three receivers until after I see what they do with Zach Wilson.
I'm with you. I'm trying to avoid them if I can. If I have to pick one, I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson because I've seen how explosive he's been so far. I have to think that it's not going to all completely disappear with Zach Wilson, but this is the moment I've been waiting for Elijah Moore. And if he has a good week this week, I'll be right back on we got to think about Elijah Moore as a flex bandwagon.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll say is I don't know if I would see what your other options are, which I know is like a cop-out answer when you're trying to give advice. But the Pittsburgh Steelers are not the Pittsburgh Steelers that we are accustomed to. They're currently the 26th ranked against fantasy wide receivers. So this is a positive matchup for wide receivers. So getting Garrett Wilson out there, if you got to take a shot in the dark in Elijah Moore, I know I'm playing Elijah Moore in probably the same Dynasty League where we talked about how, sometimes in Dynasty it's a lot harder to get depth because the waivers are already taken or people already have their backups. So I do like Wilson this week. Elijah Moore, if I, want to take a shot in the dark, like I might throw him in a DFS lineup and think he might just have a big game because he's probably pretty cheap. So that's all what I want to say about that one. And then on the Steelers side,
before you move on, my only devil's advocate here. I know you just made a case for the receivers, but you can't just think about how good the receiver is. You have to think about how good the quarterback is. And we saw Zach Wilson last year, but we also heard the reports of how bad Zach Wilson looked in preseason. And now he's coming into a game after not playing for 3 weeks. I am really sketched out by Wilson. I don't think, we can't just expect the receivers to get points because Joe Flacco's been throwing for 1,000 yards. We got to be a little wary until we know what Zach Wilson can do. So you can play them if you need to play one, but play them with caution. But go ahead, Cody. Take us off on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
No, I think that was a valid point because let's be honest, if this game ended 9-6, who would be surprised? No one. Because that's how bad the Steelers offense has been as well. So with that said, I think you're still playing Deontay Johnson because he's still been a target machine. He hasn't been getting a ton of touchdowns because the offense has been moving, but you hope he finally gets one. I think Chase Claypool is out because of the emergence of George Pickens, so like there's not a true number 2. Pat Freiermuth is even sketchy at this point because of how bad the offense has been, but there's so many poor tight ends that you might just want to play Freiermuth. So for me, it's still Najee Harris that you would play, similar to there's not a many great alternative running back options, and he gets the volume. But I don't love playing any Pittsburgh Steelers at this point, and my real wonder is how long until we see Kenny Pickett.
And guys, if you're out there listening to our advice, take all advice with a grain of salt, because you got to remember that not all leagues are the same. There's many different kinds of leagues out there. Right now, we're saying that Pat Freiermuth is a sketchy play. I don't know if we want to play him, but a guy like Freiermuth is also super valuable in those leagues that are basically touchdown dependent, that you get a ton of points for touchdowns, basically nothing for the yards. Those leagues are out there. They're actually more common than you'd think. So in those kinds of leagues, Freiermuth is one of the best touchdown options for the Steelers. In those kinds of leagues, you would start him, but we're talking mainly standard leagues here. And you know what, Cody, I agree with you. I think you're kind of sketched out on both sides of the ball here. Najee Harris is not performing up to what his draft value was, but I mean, as George said earlier, really none of the top running backs are performing up to that value. It's weird, man. It's really weird seeing this many top tier running backs just struggle.
Shout out to all my no running back strat players. This is your year to crown yourself.
Yeah, 2 of the guys you might have in a no running back strategy are playing in our next game. Jaguars traveling to the Philadelphia Eagles. James Robinson has been an amazing surprise coming off that Achilles injury. The volume is insane. And on the other side, you can't be afraid to play Miles Sanders even after a bad week, because despite the Eagles splitting carries, he's still getting 15 carries a game. Like he's still getting just as much volume as Najee Harris has been. So like 2 guys with the 0 running back strategy has been paying off so far.
I just want to say before moving on that Cody said shout out to all my 0 running back strat, like it's a great thing because these top running backs are struggling. You know, I have one league where I finally decided, you know what, I'm gonna try the no running back strategy. So shout out to all the guys who also lost last week because Justin Jefferson got 2 by going with the no running back strat. Some of these top tier receivers have been very up and down as well, so it's really no strategy is working unless you got Cooper Kupp.
It's honestly shout out to everybody who drafted very well in the middle rounds, despite your early rounds, because that's how it's been. Like my team in our league of records been absolutely carried by Amon-Ra St. Brown so far, really. So there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got CEH coming in clutch so far in the first few weeks, but
sell him.
On the Jaguars side of the ball, I like James Robinson. I don't like ETN. I'm starting to get like every week. I feel like both of you guys have been my ETN truthers, and I've had ETN in multiple leagues where I'm like, do I start this guy or ETN? And every week it's, oh yeah, start ETN. And every week he feels disappointing. And I know you keep telling me to hold on, but talk me off a ledge here, guys. I am really struggling to put ETN in my lineup anymore.
Okay, well, I'm going to not make you jump, but I don't know if you're going to get off the ledge. We'll do it that way.
Push me.
This is not a great matchup even for James Robinson. The Eagles defense, the Eagles as a whole have been playing great. So it's not a great matchup for James Robinson. It's actually going to be I think this is a real interesting case because the Jaguars have looked good, but they haven't had too many like high-end opponents. So it's like, are the Jaguars for real or what's not? So I would probably, if I can, I would probably stay away from Travis Etienne, even though I talked about him. I think he's a guy you should go out and trade for because I do think he will have a second half resurgence. But this will be a matchup to watch closely because if I had to predict, I would imagine the Eagles continue to get out early, and they have been allowing some points, but they're a team putting up a lot of points. And if the Jags get down, does that pivot more into a Travis Etienne game? And is that what we can expect moving forward? So maybe you won't play Etienne this week, but I think this could be a real test on Etienne going forward.
I think this is a real test on both sides of the ball. I think this is one of the biggest "are they real" games out there, because the Jags have been performing way above expectations, and people are starting to think like, is Trevor Lawrence finally playing like Trevor Lawrence? Is this Jags team for real? And on the Eagles side of the ball, like, look, not only are the Eagles one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl, not only is Jalen Hurts one of the favorites to win MVP, but I don't know if you guys saw, but the Eagles are the only team in the NFL that are favored to win every single game for the rest of their season. Now, I know looking at their schedule, it's pretty easy, so that's not totally shocking, but we got to think Eagles played the Lions and only won by 3. Eagles played Kirk Cousins on Monday or on a primetime game. We all know how that goes. And the Eagles played the Washington Commanders. I do think the Eagles look fantastic. They are performing very well. At the same time, you have to consider the strength of schedule so far. So, are the Eagles really as good as they look? Are the Jaguars really as good as they look? Both teams are performing really well right now. I think this is a great test on both sides.
Yeah, and you don't want to hear. Go ahead,
No,
George.
go ahead.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll go. Fine.
Yeah,
I
I'll go last.
want to hear a crazy stat in terms of fantasy.
Huh?
Let's hear
The
it.
Eagles and the Jaguars. Everyone's talking about the Eagles. They just came out with a 9-sack game. The Eagles and the Jaguars defenses are tied for number 3 DSTs in fantasy football right now, and no one is talking about the Jags. Also, the Jacksonville Jaguars are currently, according to NFL.com, ranked the number 1, poor matchup against DSTs. So even in, match, you play the Eagles, you don't play the Jags. Like, that's how I would do it. But in terms of the fantasy points they're put up for the 3 weeks, this Jags team is very similar, and it is very funny that they're coached by the former Eagles coach, which #revenge game.
#revenge game.
It is a revenge game. That's one of the things I was going to mention. But the other thing I was going to mention is, yeah, their schedule's been easy, but this is not where I see the trap game. I see the trap game coming next week against Arizona, because right now you got to stay focused on it's Doug Peterson coming to town. After the Arizona game is a divisional battle against Dallas. So talk to me next week when I talk about the Eagles sputtering. But for this week, I'm still all in on all the guys that we've been playing. If you're an owner of AJ Brown, you'll see he hasn't been practicing. Don't worry. He is expecting the birth of his child. He's supposed to be good to go this weekend. He's just been giving him a pass from practice for that. I already talked about Sanders. I think you're still good to play Devontae Smith. I think this might be a high scoring game on both sides. And
look, AJ
the
Brown's
only reason I'm still playing.
Bet the house on AJ Brown to score a touchdown. Just saying. It always happens.
True. We've seen it before. We really have actually seen it before. But I was someone who said I'd go out there and play the Eagles defense. I get exactly where Cody's been coming from with the Jaguars. They've been taking care of the ball. They've been putting up points, but it is still kind of skewed by the fact they put 38 up on the injured Chargers defense last week. And I think the Eagles defense is still going to get its sacks, get a turnover or two, and still be okay for fantasy.
All righty. Well, let's move into the 4:00 window. We got 3 games in that window. We'll start off with the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. And Christian McCaffrey took more than a leak this week, as he is now DNP for 2 consecutive days with ironically, a thigh/hip injury. So, and then the guy that scored the long touchdown, Laviska Shenault, is also DNP. So, Christian McCaffrey owners, we're now in week 4, his 3rd appearance on an injury report. Are you concerned? And if he does play, will you play him?
Well, see, that's not even my question. Like, if he plays, yes, you play him. I feel like until McCaffrey is flat out, he will not play. I feel like he has to be in your lineup. McCaffrey is on the list of running backs that have been disappointing, which is weird for me to say because it seems like I have Christian McCaffrey in our league of record, and I'm not happy about it. I've made that very clear. But Christian McCaffrey feels very disappointing. I can tell you every week I look at him and I'm like, wow, he is struggling. It just doesn't seem like him. But every week he's putting up 14 points, consistently. It seems disappointing because he's not putting up that 30 week, that 25 week that you expect from a McCaffrey once in a while. But it still seems off. But I think if he does play, you are playing him. However, this is my question to you guys because I'm at a loss. Help me out here. If Christian McCaffrey does not go, and even if you're just a McCaffrey owner and want a handcuff and want to feel a little more secure in case these injuries continue, Are you going Chuba Hubbard or Dante Foreman?
I'm withdrawing myself from this question because I'm too much of a fan of the one player. Everyone knows I'm taking Deontay Foreman. He's been like my favorite player since he was at Texas. I have no idea why, but he has been. He looked really good for the Titans last year. I don't understand why this is even a question because I would pick Foreman 10 times. But Chuba Hubbard is probably the backup. So take everything I just said with a grain of salt.
It is actually super tough. So I was like, I was interested to see where you're going to go, but I should have been expecting you to say Foreman. Sorry, I'm trying to get one more stat up here. So week 3, the only backup running back who saw any touches was Chuba Hubbard. Week 2, the only backup running back who saw any touches was Dante Foreman. Week 1, the backup running back who saw touches was not quite ready. Both. So
there you go.
And it's literally been like 2 carries, and then they had 2 and 1. So we're really kind of just, we're going to throw one out there and pray. You're probably in that case better off playing neither if there's no McCaffrey. I'm just hoping McCaffrey does play because like Tyler said, if he's in, you go. I would say Chuba Hubbard, but I'm also more on the end of nobody because we don't know.
Yeah, look, I'm not even saying like, hey, let's go start Chuba Hubbard. Like, I understand you don't know which running back's going to take off, so you don't know which one to pick up. But, I mean, just look at last season. Look what happened when McCaffrey went down and people grabbed Chuba Hubbard and what that did for fantasy owners. I mean, he was putting up 13 points a week. And for a free agent running back after all those injuries last season, that's huge. So if a fantasy manager has Christian McCaffrey, doesn't have a lot of depth at the running back position, and wants to have some security because you're starting to get nervous about Christian McCaffrey, if you stash the one that does take off after McCaffrey goes down, it could end up being the difference between you making the playoffs and not. So you guys are split on this. One would take Chuba, one would take Deontay.
Yeah, and I'll perfectly admit my fan bias might be swaying my decision. Just because I've been hoping Foreman has been a solid fantasy player since he's joined the league. So I'll admit that right off the top. But, we got to talk about the Arizona Cardinals because they're also dealing with a ton of injuries. We'll make it really quick. If James Conner plays, you play him. If he doesn't, you don't play a running back from Arizona. In my opinion. Wide receivers. Yikes. Even Greg Dortch is now on the injury report. So, good luck. Tight end.
You playing Hollywood for sure?
Yeah, you're probably still playing Hollywood. He's actually been pretty good, but he's another one disappointing because we had such high expectations. But he has, especially the last 2 weeks, he has come on. So, Hollywood you would play, and then Zach Ertz. He is the number one target in this offense. So, that is a good tight end that if you could have drafted in the middle rounds or after the big swing that you got that you're happy about. But other than that, this Cardinals team has been overall disappointing.
If you have Kyler Murray, are you starting to look elsewhere on quarterback?
His running ability, even though he's not doing a lot of it, would probably keep him in my lineup. And when you say elsewhere, unless I could maybe swing a trade where I throw in a quarterback for quarterback revolved around someone else. But, I'm not going to not play Kyler Murray to play Ryan Tannehill. I'm not going to play Kyler Murray to play Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins. Maybe Kirk Cousins. I'm probably a little bit higher on him than I should be, but I still think his athletic ability and his playmaking ability keeps him as a pretty much weekly starter.
Yeah, I'm kind of with that too, but I really don't like it. And yeah, maybe not a bad idea to throw a trade out there and try to do a quarterback swap in with that trade. But I think that wraps up Arizona and Carolina. We can move to the New England Patriots and the Green Bay Packers. Packers injury report. Is it not quite as much of a mess this week, Cody?
I mean, it's still a mess because the Packers, if you're a fan out there, you realize that they have a lot of people going limited to DNP. But pay attention to the Friday report. That's a lot more important, and we do not have the privilege of seeing that because we are recording on Thursday night. Good news, Christian Watson limited to full, so maybe cool down a little bit on the Romeo Doubs hype. We'll have to see. Still probably worth the ad. And then Allen Lazard is still dealing with the ankle injury that's kept him limited. But I do want to talk about Allen Lazard because he was a guy, the number one for Aaron Rodgers. We were expecting a lot of big things for, and he has stayed fantasy relevant because in his 2 games he has caught a touchdown, but he is not putting up the yards. He only has a handful of catches. So it doesn't look like realistically, like Romeo Doubs was the first Packers wide receiver to have a dominant quote unquote wide receiver 1 type of game. Every other game, like no one saw more than 4 targets. So now that they're getting a little bit healthier, we go a little bit more towards that. So there's not a lot of pass catcher options for the Packers that I feel extremely confident about playing, even with the back-to-back MVP at quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not starting Lazard if I have him. He's riding the bench for me still. All right, going on to the New England Patriots side of the ball. Mac Jones did not practice, not expected to play. He has the serious high ankle sprain. We talked about it last episode. Jacoby Myers was limited. Look, Mac Jones out. We do not really want to start any pass catching options from New England. Running backs, are you starting either of Damian Harris or Ramondre Stevenson? I mean, if the quarterback is down, they're probably going to go with the run game a lot more. Both of these guys have looked competent at times. Is there one that you like more? Are you starting both? You starting neither?
I feel like I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm not going to start these players, and it's pretty much all the running backs, unfortunately. And because I don't want to start either of them. The Packers are at number 8 against fantasy running backs. They've looked really well against the run, and they know they're going to have to run the ball with Brian Hoyer back there. Like that's going to be the mindset. So I don't love it. It's hard to, catch a team by surprise when you're expecting them to run the ball. And I don't know if the Patriots are the team that, everyone knows Derrick Henry's going to get the ball. He still can put up 200 yards. I don't think any of these guys are, and that's what they're going to be looking at this week. So I'm out, and I've probably been out on a lot of wide receivers that you are going to unfortunately have to play this week.
And side note, backs, but Packers defense is 64% owned if they are available. Another solid streaming defense out there. But go ahead, George. What is your answer on the running back question?
I was actually going to mention the defense if you didn't, so that's good. I am leaning Ramondre Stevenson, and I would avoid Damian Harris if you can. Their carries are basically 50-50, but Stevenson has been the more effective in yards per touch and also in the passing game. He has significantly been, more used than Damian Harris in the passing game. So I like his ceiling a lot better.
Yeah, but just a reminder, Harris is the goal line guy. So very similar to, not that either of these guys are on DeAndre Swift's level, but like Jamal Williams just ate in the red zone the last 3 weeks. Now he's getting an opportunity, but you could see that from Damian Harris. Stevenson looks good all day, and then Harris gets the touchdown. But we do have one more matchup to talk about, and that is the Denver Broncos at the Las Vegas Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders, like I mentioned, are the only 0-3 team. Shout out to the Houston Texans for being 0-2-1 so that they can say that. And the big thing is Hunter Renfrow is now DNP for a second consecutive week with a concussion. So this is a long-term concussion. And I'm going to step back from fantasy for a second and just be like, I hope Hunter Renfrow gets better soon. Once you see these concussions taking a while to recover for, you always start to worry about the players even more so. So just hoping for the best for Hunter Renfrow. With that said, the guy who has stepped up in a big way in his absence is Mac Hollins. And this is not the week to play Mac Hollins. George is already stressed because that's another Eagles wide receiver that has gone and balled out somewhere else. Shout out to him, Nelson Aguilar, Jalen Reagor. He's going to ball out soon too.
No, he's not.
Okay, maybe not. But the Denver Broncos, they haven't looked great on offense, but their secondary, especially Patrick Surtain, who will see a lot of Devontae Adams, but that'll free up the secondary to help out, has been dominant all season. So you still play Devontae Adams despite his limited production the last couple of weeks, but and maybe you're in your Darren Waller because the tight end position, but you're not running out to play Mac Hollins. Don't chase those points.
And I said it last week or on last episode, Mac Hollins was matched up against Terrence Mitchell, who the Titans signed 4 days before that. I don't care who the Broncos are starting at corner against Mac Hollins, but I promise you that it'll be better than Terrence Mitchell, so don't expect Mac Hollins to repeat what he did.
Yeah, I agree. And on the Broncos side, I honestly think the one person who's been, completely fine through this entire horrible offense so far has been Cortland Sutton. He's really stepped up as the wide receiver one. He even still scored a lot of points, a lot of it in that last drive where they finally scored a touchdown last week to win that game, but he's been pretty good. Outside of Cortland Sutton, I mean, you're still probably playing Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, trying to avoid it. Jerry Jeudy is my other big question, though. Where you at in Jerry Jeudy?
Well, to step back to the Cortland Sutton thing first, I can tell you that every season in the offseason on this podcast, I mentioned a player that I don't like for fantasy, and I can't tell you a good reason why. I just don't like him. Last year was Matt Stafford, who ended up winning a Super Bowl. This year it was Cortland Sutton, who I ended up drafting and has looked solid on one of the ugliest teams there is. So, if you really want to win a fantasy championship, listen to our off-season podcasts. Listen to whoever I say I don't like for no reason. I promise you that guy will be amazing. I feel like that's why Sutton is stepping up. Jerry Jeudy is kind of one of those situations where it depends on your depth. Again, a cop out answer. It happens. He's not a guy where you're definitely like, I need to start him. But look, injuries are already piling up. There's already some stud players that are not performing. Like, if you were a guy who maybe was relying on someone like Darnell Mooney in your flex, maybe you're starting Jerry Jeudy, because I would trust Jeudy well above Darnell Mooney at this point.
I second
So
that.
yeah, it's sad. And there's some other players as well. There's some, guys like Michael Thomas or Jarvis Landry who have been dealing with injuries, and maybe you want to start a Jerry Jeudy over them because you're a little bit questionable on him. He's a flex option. Depends how much depth you have. He's the kind of guy that if you have Jeudy and you're a little bit unsure if you should play him or not, please reach out to us. Let us know. We can help you out with that.
I'll reach out to you.
Okay.
Okay. I have our league of record, actually. I'll help you set my lineup. I have Amon-Ra St. Brown. If he doesn't go, I'm going to need another place to go. I have a lot of guys in that same area. So I'll say Jerry Jeudy or Jarvis Landry.
Jeudy. Yep. Landry's hurt.
Jeudy.
Yep. Elijah Moore.
Jeudy. Look, I know what Elijah Moore can do. I would say if your team is looking like you need that one player to give you 25 to have a chance to win because you're playing a tough opponent, start Elijah Moore. I feel like he has the bigger ceiling, but I feel like Jeudy has the better floor. If you're just looking to throw somebody in there hoping they get 10 points and just stay consistent and then you should win because you're playing a weaker opponent, go Jeudy. There's my detailed answer.
Okay.
I'd go Elijah Moore.
Oh,
just overall.
Okay.
Yeah. That's also part because I would not play Russell Wilson this week. So even in a good matchup.
Okay. And then finally, if he does go, it seems like he's probably going to be okay. Greg Dortch.
The Dortch.
I'm giving my respect. Greg Dortch. I thought this guy was fake for 3 weeks, so it's probably not the week to play him because I'm finally buying into it. Greg Dortch.
Look, I just got in an argument with a Cardinals fan the other day who's trying to tell me the Titans suck, and I said one of your best players on your team is Greg Dortch. Shut up. And that was my insult, and yet now Greg Dortch is actually good, so it's kind of frustrating. But Greg Dortch, yeah, I would start Dortch. He's been very consistent.
All right. That answers where about you would put Jerry Jeudy in that tier, but we have 2 more games to cover. We'll go to Sunday Night Football. The Kansas City Chiefs traveling to the beat-up Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers are getting Mike Evans back from his suspension, but Chris Godwin did not practice. Rashad Perryman did not practice. Julio Jones, limited participant in practice, but obviously is dealing with a tear in that knee. That's just going to have to be a pain management and rehab kind of deal. Ugh. Is all I can say, really. Like, at least he's got Evans back. Like, do you start Brady because of that and hope, or where you at?
No, you start at Mike Evans. You don't start Brady. You start Fournette unless you have 2 really good running backs you can put over top of it. Other than that, I'm not starting anybody. I'm sure Cody will disagree.
I would only say if Julio goes, he would be in that same consideration we were just talking about. And if you think that the Buccaneers can put up points, but on another wild stat, we are now in week 4. The Buccaneers have not scored a touchdown in the first half in any of their first 3 games.
which is a wild stat. It is crazy. Yeah, I disagree with you, Cody, on the Julio thing. I don't even want him on my flex. Like, I saw what he could do in week 1. Yes, I saw that. I understand that. It gives him, that intrigue value, but I've also watched Julio Jones not be able to stay on the field now. Um, Take it from a Titans fan who had to watch this every single week last year. Every week he would say, "I'm healthy enough to play." Every week by the end of the first quarter, he's on the sideline because it hurts too bad to play. Um, I know what Julio can do. I know the player he is. I don't trust him to make it through a full game, especially right now while he's still been limited in practice. I don't want to flex him. He's on my bench.
I'll be with Tyler. I do not trust playing Julio, and I don't even really necessarily want to roster Julio just because even if he was healthy, it's not going to be too long before he's far enough down the depth chart that I don't want to touch him.
Okay. Chiefs side. Patrick Mahomes, probably Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but this is like the number 1 run defense in the NFL, not fantasy-wise, but in terms of actually defending the run. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire has been a lot of big plays, not a lot of opportunities. So I would be a little bit concerned, but I've already said sit too many running backs to not play Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I think the clock is counting down to T-minus 2 days for you to sell Clyde Edwards-Helaire before he puts up a 4 and all his value is completely gone. I don't trust it. You're probably going to have to play him unless you're deep at running back and just hope that I'm wrong. But this is the perfect scenario for how it's been going so far this year for Clyde Edwards-Helaire to absolutely bust.
Yeah, I was fully on the trade CEH train. His value is just still not where I'd want it to be in the league that I am trying to trade him. Also, like in our league of record, I have CEH. I am starting him, not because I want to, but because I have DeAndre Swift is injured. I got Zeke and Pollard. I don't even know what to expect from them. Like Pollard might put up a big play eventually, and Zeke might put up a touchdown eventually. But otherwise, it's like neither one of them are solid outside of those things. Like, who do you play? In my situation, Zeke, Pollard, CEH. Which one are you playing?
Ooh. CEH. Don't love it. Yeah, okay. I'll talk a little bit while Cody looks. Like, you gotta hope CEH gets involved in the pass game, I think is where you're at.
Yeah, I think I would go Zeke. Just because I'm just that Tampa Bay run defense, and they have the 2 fastest linebackers in the NFL if he is on the swing route. I am just pretty out on CH this week. Not saying I love the Zeke play because you're banking that he gets a touchdown, but at least it's against the Commanders who have given up points all 3 weeks. So, and that's a tough one, but that's where I would go.
So we're absolutely no help for you, Tyler. But
thank you. Appreciate you.
It's going to be, dart throw either way. So go ahead and spin that wheel on Sunday morning like Cody likes to do to me when I ask him lineup questions and see who it lands on and go with it. But Monday Night Football, Los Angeles Rams traveling to the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers, I was so far in. And now I'm watching, Jimmy Garoppolo run out of the back of the end zone. They put up 10 points against Denver. Again, Denver's a decent defense, but that was such a bad showing. And then Mike Boone destroying the running backs for Denver. I don't know. But anyway. San Francisco is kind of sketchy to me. Like, you got to start Debo. You got to start Jeff Wilson. Ayuk is definitely knocked back down the peg where he's probably on my bench. Do you guys disagree with any of that? I guess I did mention you're starting Kittle too, but
yeah, I don't know if you guys saw the video that's going around the internet right now, but the lip reading of Jimmy G saying these plays he's calling are a word I'm not supposed to say on a podcast that's not explicit. Look, Jimmy G's frustrated. He was not happy about that play calling, and I think the way they performed, gave some credit to that. And until that gets figured out, it's going to be hard to start anybody outside of Debo and Jeff Wilson.
And I don't even know if I would start Jeff Wilson this week against this matchup.
Ooh.
That's true.
But here I am saying another running back that you won't start. So I don't feel great about a lot of the running back matchups this week. And then, yeah, Jimmy G, I thought it'd be an uptick. I thought Brandon Ayuk would be better. I thought it'd be an uptick, and it just hasn't been. It's only been 1 week, so there's plenty of time to correct it. Like, this team was in the NFC Championship game last year, so they can still turn it around. Like,
for sure.
But it's tough sailing. And then on the Rams side, the team they played in the NFC Championship game, a little bit of a rematch. I would still play. You're obviously still playing Cooper Kupp. I'm still going to take a flyer on A-Rob in most situations as like a flexible guy. And then the Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson is getting a lot closer to a 50-50 split, making either of them a tough play and also not a great matchup. So this game could either be super high scoring or another, primetime burner for the 49ers.
I'm at the point where I'd almost rather start Ben Skoranek over Allen Robinson. And I'm not even joking.
I mean, I'm not too far off from you. And they had 5 targets. Allen Robinson had 5 targets to Ben Skoranek's 4. I still want to hear Cody try to say his name because he said he would after week 1 and never
only
got
when he scores a touchdown.
To make him say it. Yep. But I don't know the actual snap count numbers. Cody, I don't know if you have them up in front of you. Cam Akers dominated touches last week, is looking a lot better, had 5.1 yards per carry. I think we're finally getting through that slow start Cam Akers. He's starting to come back into relevance.
I mean, he definitely looked better. Still not a player that I'm like, you have to throw into your lineup. But, I mean, look, Cody already said to bench every running back in the NFL this week. So, if you are someone who has Cam Akers, maybe you have to throw him in because we're running out of running backs here.
Cody's playing in 1 running back leagues where the flex plays a wide receiver or a tight end, so you have the choice to play running back. That's what he's playing in.
All right, so they split snaps, it appears. They ran 48 snaps on offense, and Cam Akers ran 24, and Darrell Henderson ran 24.
So exactly a 50-50 split. But when it comes to touches, we had Cam Akers with 12, Darrell Henderson with 4, and 1 target he didn't catch. So that's a pretty big difference when it comes to when they're on the field trying to get that player involved.
Yeah, that could.
Yeah, but if they're both playing 50% of snaps, then it all comes down to the play calling. Then, and it depends on game flow. Darrell Henderson could be in those situations where now we have to run it, and he's the guy that's on the field. Like, it could flip. They're both sketchy, but I feel like fantasy as a whole is kind of down this year in points. I mean, week 2 there was like randomly players
the whole league's
ridiculous
down.
Points, and what? Yeah, all your top players are down. We're talking about your top receivers putting up dud weeks. We're talking about your top running backs being complete disappointments. Your top tight ends being outside of Kelsey being horrible, and Mark Andrews. They're horrible. Like, I feel like across the board, fantasy is just not putting up the points. And can I just give a shout out real quick to our resident betting expert, Kempy, who is in our league of record, who is now undefeated, 3-0, and has not broken 100 points yet this year in a half-point PPR. Like, that's the craziness of this season.
Yeah, I think it's right. And I think there's something to it because even the Washington Post put out, I believe it was the Washington Post, could have been one of the other ones, but that's not the point, put out a article this past week that through the first 3 weeks, league average scoring is down because so many defenses are playing too high safeties and, making teams go 10, 12 yards. You're not seeing those explosive plays that we've become accustomed to. Hopefully the NFL doesn't get as crazy as baseball and be like, hey, you're not allowed to play that defense anymore. Like baseball said, hey, you're not allowed to do the shift anymore. But yeah,
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, that we don't have time for that anymore this week. But I do want to do this for Snyder real quick. I don't know if you can see it. If you're watching, go over to the Couch GMs YouTube. We're going to spin the wheel for CEH. And I literally do this pretty much every week when they ask me a fantasy question because I'm a word I'm not allowed to say on a non-explicit podcast. And it looks like your winner is Zeke. So the wheel agrees with me. So take that for what it is.
I just want you to know that the quality of trying to show your phone on a camera is pretty poor. So I could not read your screen at all. All I saw was the colors and the fact that Zeke was red, but CEH was blue when their team colors are the complete opposite. That was really frustrating because I was like, oh, wow, there you go. It says CEH. And then you're like, it's Zeke. Like,
I'm
dang it,
sorry.
Cody.
I didn't do that. That's what the app made it do. And I couldn't focus because it would have punched into my face, and nobody wants to see it my nostrils.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. All right, well, there you have it. It says Zeke, so oh god.
All right, guys. In all seriousness, we have to go watch the Uniform Bowl, as I'm going to now call it. So let us know how well our predictions were at the beginning. And as always, thanks for listening.
Look, if our predictions were great because Tyler Boyd really did put up 4 touchdowns, then wow. Because I only have him in one league and I benched him, so I'll be very frustrated at this point if that was real. But either way, guys, look, fantasy is crazy this year. Points are down. Players are not performing up to expectations. Right now, this is the time where if you have your questions, reach out to us. It is still early in the season. You can fix anything that's wrong. If you're 0-3, you can still make the playoffs. If you're 3-0, you can still make those moves that'll keep you strong instead of waiting for the downfall. Either way, reach out to us. Let us help you win a championship. And besides, this podcast is so much more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved.
Yes, it is, Tyler, and thank you all one more time for listening into the Couch GMs podcast. For Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth, and we'll see y'all next week.